Hey guys, talk about Path of Exile in a relevant year. Before we get into the point of this video to talk about traps, I'm going to take a moment to appreciate my amazing headband. My hair's annoying me, and I'm like, I've got an easy fix for this. So the hair is no longer getting in my eyes, and I can't see, so it's a win-win-win. We started an SF restart, it took me ages to get into it. I finally got on it, sort of into it, and I'm playing an ice trapper. I have zero idea how I want to build it. So I'm going to briefly run a map with my level 70 or whatever I am character, because people get angry if you do videos which are just let's stare at path of building. But the point of this video will be to just kind of stare at path of building, talk through some of the things I'm considering, and maybe get some input. Obviously, ideally, we would get one of several things running on this build. Divergent Berserk with the Kurui Timeless Jewel is amazing on trappers, because if you don't know what it does, basically instead of regenerating mana, you turn your mana regen into rage regeneration, and then you use Divergent Berserk to get crazy damage reduction and damage scaling. And yeah, it's just really, really strong. And because traps hit not you, and you don't need to cast anything but that, you can use stuff like Eldritch Battery. There are a few different ways to use it. It just works very well on trappers. You can either go for like a Tinkerskin route for sustaining Energy Shield. You can just invest into Energy Shield. Or you can go the Katarina Helmet, whose name escapes me currently, and go that route with Eldritch Battery to save some skill points on this tree and run more auras. So it just kind of like works. So that's one thing which would be kind of cool to get running, but that obviously requires timeless jewels and then potentially a bunch of random uniques. So that's like a whole thing, which obviously that requires other things to come online, so that will take a while before we can go into that. Another thing which would be obviously pretty nice if you're not going that route is going the Incursion Gloves route. And the Incursion Gloves route is just, again, a series of RNG upon RNG upon RNG. And if you get that, you get Blood Magic Traps. And those are kind of like the two main ways people do traps these days. Oh, I didn't notice that was behind me. Is they either get like the Blood Magic Trap route and get some cast speed scaling for trap throwing speed, or they do the Divergent... Well, they do Divergent Berserk on both setups, but like you either go like the Blood Magic route or you go like the Eldritch Battery route, and you know, avoid mana completely. So those are things which should be kind of neat to do, both of which require like me actually playing the video game and getting quite lucky. So it's something that I'm kind of keeping in the back of my head while I think about different ways I could route my tree, different setups. If I want to go life-based, energy shield-based, low-life, hybrid, acro, non-acro, do I want to go block? So I want to go block with the shields, I want to go block with the staff, so on and so forth. All I really know is I'm going to use Ice Trap. Ice Trap has been my least played trap of all of the trap skills. A lot of people really like Ice Trap. People like the Flower MTX. The Flower MTX is pretty. And I was thinking about this when I was trying to work out, like, okay, if I'm going to start playing Path of Exile again, what's something that I haven't done in a really long time? I realized I haven't actually played a freeze build in a super long time, because most of the builds that I play are dot-based. Anything good? Yeah, they're dot-based, or they're like ignite, fire, or just hit fire, or like lightning trap. And I really enjoyed on my Occultist Corsair carry the freezing on bosses when the Ascendancy would rotate around. Frigid Wake, I believe it's called. And I was like, oh, that would be fun. We could also just make a build which just freezes everything. I'm like, oh, people always ask me about Ice Trap, so we'll do an Ice Trap build. So I know that I'm playing Ice Trap. That's really all I know. And after we do this map, which will probably take 50 years, because, you know, rituals and blights, and I'm sure we'll get a djinn and all the other stuff, I'll just make a couple of trees in Path of Building, and maybe you guys can give me some input and say, I think this would be good, or I think this would be terrible. Oh, I can see again. That's nice. So yeah. Otherwise, what have I been up to? I haven't actually been doing much more of my Blender stuff, sadly. I got really into it, and then I was in hospital, is it Saturday? 2 days ago for Crohn's stuff. Nothing to panic about, just same old boring Crohn's being Crohn's being Crohn's. And I was just kind of like pretty unwell for about 4 or 5 days leading up to that. So that kind of like killed my blender drive. But I want to get really into that again. And another thing, while we're just kind of clearing this map, I guess I could ask you the question. Would you guys prefer, yay, my first Uber trial, that any like devloggy style content, like me messing around in Blender, me messing around in Unity or whatever, do you want that on this channel? Or should I maybe look into making a second channel and then just putting all of that stuff on the second channel? Because some people get really whiny when they're like, I subbed to you for Path of Exile. This isn't Path of Exile, Tarke. Wah! And, you know, it's kind of annoying. So, yeah, so I don't know. I've been thinking about, like, should I make a second channel just for that stuff? But then I'm like, but I don't know if there's really much point. I'd rather just have everything all on one channel. I don't know. But yes. So, back to Path of Exile. When it comes to my setups, I'm pretty sure I'm going to try and do this as a non-acro tree. Just because most of the trappers I play do the whole acro thing. I did play the Mind Over Matter trapper earlier this league, which I quite enjoyed. And since I don't have access to like cluster jewels and everything, because again, it's just started an SF restart, I have 0 gear. I've got a tabular and that's it. I don't want to do like any crazy trees which are like dependent on running like double cluster jewel setups, because like, bruh, I don't have anything, right? Maybe if I'm still, you know, actively playing this in like 2 weeks time and I've gotten pretty lucky with my drops and I'm like really progressed along with the Atlas and I've gotten everything down, then yeah, we can look into like weird cluster jewel setups. But basically we're going to be looking at bog standard trees. So I'm thinking I probably won't play around with acro. The main decision really... Hey, corrupted blood jewel, nice. The main decision really is, do I want to go block or not? The block stuff is actually pretty easy to fit into a trapper tree, but it requires quite a high level trapper tree, especially because I'm wanting to invest into a bunch of like freeze effects, like freeze duration and stuff like that. I'm not going crazy for it, but I do take a few like choice nodes I think people actually quite often overlook when it comes to, like, if you want to freeze, why don't people take these nodes sort of thing. And I'll show you those after this ritual. The main ones being Fingers of Frost. A lot of builds route right past it and don't take it for 3 points. And whatever the 2-point ailment duration node is in Shadow Start. Basically, those points I pick up, and what's the other weird, not weird, but like the underutilized node. I take the Cold Fire 3-pointer. What's that one? Snowforged. A lot of people don't seem to take these for whatever reason. But yeah, Elemental Focus gives increased duration of elemental ailments. Obviously, that's increased freeze. Also gives increased effects of like chill, which is pretty neat. And then again, increased effect of cold ailments. Freeze is a cold ailment. Enemies become chilled as they unfreeze. Chance to freeze enemies which are chilled, which means that if I get unlucky and I don't roll a crit, there's actually a decent chance that I'll freeze anyway. So basically, with some of these like auxiliary points, it then makes doing the full block stuff a little bit yikes in terms of, I think I'm actually going to go for the TML. It makes it a little bit yikes to fit in terms of points. So with that out of the way, let's get looking into Path of Building. Right, speedrun. Pew, pew. We're not going to be taking chain reaction because we're not using any cooldown traps, so we don't need it. And this is just a lot of damage. And the main reason why I don't like Ice Trap generally is it has 5% base crit chance. So we need as much crit scaling as possible. That's another reason to focus more on trees which go kind of like hard left. A lot of my normal like fire trap or explosive trap trees kind of just stick to this part of the skull tree. I don't think there's really enough crit to get away with that when you're doing a 5% base crit skill and then you don't have access to like really good gear to pump up those numbers. Energy shield could be the play. The energy shield tree is actually pretty straightforward to fit in. Like, it's a pretty neat routing. I would like to fit these points in. I don't know if I can afford those points. Right, and this is kind of where you need to make decisions. That's kind of like easy, pretty efficient routing, not too much travel anywhere. Kind of makes sense. And then it's like, okay, are we going left? Are we going up and around? Are we going down this way? If you're doing stuff with staves, you probably loop along the top and pick up like Serpent Stance and then Arcane Potency and Counterweight. And then obviously if you're doing shield block, you want Arcane Guarding. Don't think I can actually afford to invest into any AoE nodes. So that's only 152 life, so at this point you either like come along this way and grab Purity of Flesh, and maybe get like Arcane Potency. And then you've got like a 174 tree. Maybe instead of coming this way, come along that way. It's a couple of extra points, that and that, but then you're like looking like a 100 tree. You do a Lyra with this build. So that's kind of like option 1, which is pretty softcore. So 174 life, no real defense on the tree other than like what you get from Sab. And kind of going a bit hungry for DPS nodes. You could do a very similar looking tree, which is going to San life. And that would basically just be the exact same routing, but going to San life. Really would like to keep in the whole elemental focus meme. This is also the thing. I think that a lot of people, this is where a lot of people go wrong when it comes to making their own builds, I feel like, is they over-invest into memes. What I mean by that is they try and fit too many different memes all into one build. So it's perfectly fine to be like, I want to play something kind of suboptimally because I want to focus on one thing. Like, for example, I want to focus in on freeze duration or like chill effect or whatever. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But then if that's your meme, then that's it. Like, you don't then be like, I want to focus on this, and then I want to run these 8 really shit uniques, and I want to run this, and I want to run... Like, that's where most people seem to go wrong. This seems not that bad in terms of points, because I forgot to put all the trap nodes in. That would generally help. So yeah, that's kind of 98, not that bad. It's got a bunch of jewels in. Generally, you don't get to use jewels that much in SSF. If you were to cap it out for like 2 extra points, you'd probably pick up like Prodigal Perfection. You generally want a little bit of mana investment if you haven't got a solution to your mana scaling by like having good gear or whatever. But yeah, you'd get Ash, Frost, and Storm, which gives some increased chill effect, which is kind of neat. It's actually pretty decent in terms of just like 50% LE damage for 3 points with some resist is also pretty nice in SSF. And then you get the chill effect there, chill effect there, chill effect there. If you get a Thread of Hope, this is a pretty good Thread of Hope spot because you can pick up Breath of Rime and Heart of Ice and Snowforged. You also get Arcane Focus, which is decent if you're doing like a hybrid or an ES tree. Yeah, this is how many more points? 2 more points. Slightly, no, the damage would be about the same. Kind of trading that for that. 3 jewel slots versus the other one was also 3 jewel slots, but it's like 27% more life. But 2 extra points. And then Staff would look... Staff... The Staff tree is also a bit funky because I'm generally quite open to the idea of using staffs on trappers if you're doing stuff like Fire Trap, Flamethrower Trap, because then you can have like 2 big... So you take Hasty Reconstruction. I didn't take that in the other trees, did I? You don't want that. But yeah, you take like Hasty Reconstruction, and then you're on like a big cooldown trap, and then you're on like a utility, like a map clear trap or whatever, and 2 6 links. But with Ice Trap, there's not a particularly good trap to combo it with. You can just throw Flamethrower Trap in anyway, because Flamethrower Trap is good. And as long as you're not investing too heavily, like that's when it then, like, taking stuff like this becomes a bit weaker, but taking stuff like Snowforge, for example, is fine because it's got some fire scaling in it. You could then maybe like, oh, but you could use a staff and go like Combs. But wait, sorry, we're saying this was the staff tree. Yeah, you kind of need to invest into all the block you can get. But then you need to have a Combs and SSF, and I mean, Combs isn't that difficult to farm, but it's also not that easy to farm. That's only 140 life. Yeah, that's very softcore. If I trimmed off like floating DPS nodes, you could dip into Templar. 160 is still very softcore. Like, that's very softcore if you like cut off some fluff and points. That's too softcore for my tastes. It's kind of hard. The main thing that you struggle with is fitting in Serpent Stance. It's quite easy to just route along this way and just skip Serpent Stance. It feels bad to skip though because it's a lot of multi. It's 50 multi, and then a bunch of crit, which is nice, and then a little bit of block as well, which is kind of neat. The shield tree is pretty easy to do. But that is like a level 100 tree, and then it's just a case of prioritizing, okay, what are we going to drop? I don't think you can afford to take stuff like Elemental Focus in that tree off the top of my head. If you're wondering what my thought process is, or like how I'm deciding like, oh, this is the way to route or that isn't the way to route, I've just played a lot of these builds before. So it's kind of just force of habit. It's probably some stuff slightly inefficient about the way I'm doing it, just because I'm kind of just doing this off memory, rather than sitting down and number crunching each individual node, which is something I tend to do later on into a character's life cycle. Generally what will happen is I'll just kind of like freewheel a couple of trees, not even bother like inputting gear, just kind of like just gauge numbers from this and like adding up my totals. I'm like, okay, how much life have I put into this build? Does that seem about right? Yeah, that seems okay. Okay, how much damage have I got in this build? Oh, I've got this much multi. Okay, that seems okay. And then playing it, and if I'm still playing it like 94, 95, then it's like, okay, now let's do the maths and really kind of see what's what. So that looks decent. 175 life, 3 jewel sockets. I keep forgetting, I'm really bad at forgetting to put Blast Cascade into my trees. I don't know why, it's just a strange force of habit. So yeah, the point's a little high. Going a Lyra is always a bit of a yikes. You could cut a jewel. Cutting jewels feels very bad. But that would basically give you... You'd probably have 75... You'd have 75 block, like 50 spell block, and then if you had like a spell block shield, you could maybe get it to 75, 75. You might need to like get a pretty nice spell block shield. Maybe have some random block essence gear. And then if I was going to do a acro tree, I would probably root it, sort of. The acro tree is the easiest to root, but the problem with the acro trees, I don't mind them if you're playing a very high DPS trap. Like if you're playing like explosive trap, because explosive trap just has damage. Like it has so much damage, you don't even need to try and scale the damage. And I don't mind it in Trade League. If I was playing in Trade League, I'd probably always just do acro trees. The issue you have with them is that they're actually not that great in terms of damage. Like if you were to compare the DPS of this tree to, I don't know, just say this one, for example, they're pretty good comparatively. So 1 point difference. Assume I haven't forgotten anything too important. This tree would probably be about 20-25% more damage than this tree. You wouldn't think it'd be that big of a difference because you're like, oh, but Tarke, by coming this way, you got like this little bit of crit multi, And then that's not a trap. You got these trap nodes, like that's really good, right? This is something that you want to anoint to get frenzy charge generation, or you run charge traps for frenzy charge generation. So you're basically kind of getting like 3 trap wheels, or 2 trap wheels, 1 crit node. Basically getting 3 DPS wheels. But if you compare it to this tree, this gets a huge chunk of multi. This is a bunch of just cold scaling, a bunch of crit chance, crit multi, bunch of spell damage. Down here, some damage, some spell, some crit, very importantly. And a little bit of extra spell down here. So like it just kind of adds up. Like you often forget just how strong. I mean, kind of just like Throat Seeker alone kind of just carries so much weight. And then when you've got this right next to it, it's like, woohoo, pretty tasty. It's really nice on fire builds because you get the crit multi here as well. And it feels very, very nice. But yeah, I think I'm leaning towards this tree, just like the Scion tree, and then maybe going into the shield block tree if I'm still playing this in like high 90s and I could get my hands on a cool Shaper Shield, and then getting a life recovery on block shield. And then an ES tree, which I'm not entirely sure how I would want to route it, would probably actually be the most optimal outside of Berserk setups. Because that's the thing as well, like when you're then adding the whole Divergent Berserk, you then either need to be getting Eldritch Battery or Blood Magic from an item, or you need to be like taking Eldritch Battery for 2 points, or using the Blood Magic Helmet. Like you then need to like work out your mana cost that way. And you don't take a life in ES builds, Tarke. Who would take block? You'd probably go like, if you can fit elemental focus in. I don't think you can. You'd probably go something like that. You wouldn't take Wicked Ward. You'd just get regen. I feel like for the ES build, you want to invest more into mana, because you're more likely to be wanting to run more auras, and you don't have like easy access to like Eldritch Battery or Blood Magic shenanigans. So I feel like you want a little bit of mana investment. Maybe even taking Sovereignty. I don't know what my reservations would be. So 159 ES, pretty low. So at this point, you've got some options. You either like come down into like Glancing Blows, Melding, 189, that was pretty good. And then cut a point somewhere, so then you probably have to drop LA Focus, right? So that's a level 99 tree with 4 jewels. That's pretty tasty. 189 ES is respectable. Good amount of damage. Good amount of defense from the block. Oh, missed out. Zealot's Oath, that's very important. So it's level 100 tree, but 4 jewels, you then just trim back on jewels. This is actually pretty... I knew that I'd done the thing. I don't know, I always forget to fill in. Blast Cascade always trips me up. Okay, so now it's a bit tighter, and I just realized that I didn't get to fill in Fingers of Frost, which is fun. Maybe you can't afford the Glancing Blows. Maybe you don't do Glancing Blows, maybe you just get like a... Like, you could cut all of that. Like, you could cut it back to their 184, which is pretty good. That's level 87 tree. That's very respectable. And then maybe you look into a Cluster Jewel setup. Cluster Jewels are really nice on ES builds. You can get energy from Naught on the smalls for the big chunks of flat ES, which is pretty tasty. Could go for energy shield from Equipped Shield if you get like a really beastly shield. There's even the option if you got like a Thread of Hope coming down this way, threading Phase Acro and picking up a bunch of increased defenses from Equipped Shield is really nice. If you get your hands on a big ES shield, that can be really big. But yeah, you could then potentially do like that. Maybe if you then just did a medium into a small, because it is SSF, and I can't guarantee that I'd get like a really juicy Cluster Jewel setup. but you could just be like that. Pray that you get a trap medium. If not a trap medium, crit mediums is also pretty good for this build. And then you would want guerrilla tactics is nice. Trap throwing speed, movement speed is really strong. And then set and forget can be pretty good if you're struggling with trap trigger AoE. Surprise sabotage is obviously great because it gives you crit multi and pen, which is obviously always really nice. And yeah, you'd go for that, and then you could even go for an armor one to get enduring composure, which is pretty nice to get endurance charge generation. Otherwise, you would go for the energy shield and just getting a chunk of flat energy shield, energy from naught, and even going for stuff to do with like spell block if you're trying to like make up for any missing block anywhere. The other thing which is a little bit iffy about doing CI or doing low life, because obviously if this is a low life tree, you just cut these 2 points and grab pain achievement. Like that's pretty good in terms of like, you know, good amount of ES, has all the important damage unless I've forgotten half of it. Still actually has some decent block. This would probably be like what, 40 block, maybe like 20 spell block. 30 spell block if you roll the spell block shield, which is like still decent. 190 ES, pretty good. Crafting ES gear isn't that difficult. Maybe this should be what I should look into. You have the issue with stat requirements as a real pain. Because you generally want a pretty good spread of stats. You need enough dex to run Ice Trap, all the trap supports. I really like Dash. And then you want enough strength to maybe run like a Steel Skin. Maybe you can go for like a low strength setup. And you just run like a Cast Iron Shake and a Mortal Call to keep the values low. Yeah, I don't know. But if you've got any suggestions, if you've got any input on what you think is a good vibe, let me know. And also let me know what you think about a second channel, or if I should just keep everything on the main channel. I think I'd rather just keep everything on the main channel. If I had to rate these shields, I would probably say that Super Softcore one I don't like, the Staff one I don't like, the Acro one I like in trade with really good gear. I'd probably rank them sort of like this. This is just like easy. You have enough life. You don't have much defense outside of life though, so it's a little bit but you got a good mix of damage. The ES tree, good ES numbers, has some block stuff going on to kind of even out the defense alongside Born in the Shadows and Pyromaniac. I'd worry a bit about stuns, because I haven't got a good way of dealing with stuns in this build, and you'd then depend on getting stun uniques or like relying on Brine King, which would be a bit iffy. I want stun immunity in an ES build. Shield block is a nice setup, but I'd have to cut some of the fun points like Fingers of Frost, which sucks, because I'd rather not do that. And it requires having a good shaper shield, and even if you do cut off some of the fun nodes, it's still quite a high level tree. But saying that, it's difficult getting 3 really good jewels early on an SSF on a fresh reset. So yeah, you'd probably just cut some jewels early. The other good thing about this is it's very easy to transition the Scion tree into the shield block tree. Acro tree is very good, and how I tend to do a lot of my, like, if I know I'm just going to be playing a trapper for a short period of time, like if I'm like doing testing or whatever, I tend to default into trees that look kind of like this, just because it's very strong consistently early through middle, and you'll only kind of feel it tapering off in the end game if you're trying to do like really high content and you haven't got good gear. Like if you're using a tree like this on a trap which isn't an explosive trap and you've got like absolute terrible gear, then yeah, you're going to struggle a bit against like, I don't know, Awaken a 9 Cirrus or whatever. But it will get you your early Cirruses no problem, and you'll feel very tanky for mapping. You've got a good life pool, you've got the Acro, you've got the Wind Dancer. You've got the blind action. Like, that will feel good, especially with the freezes as well. The downside of doing stuff like this is if you kind of go this way, you kind of commit to going this way. Also, you struggle getting high int in this tree, which means that if you happen to ID some like godly wands, you can't use them very easily because wands have really high stat requirements, which is an issue I ran into a couple of leagues ago in SSF, actually. I was doing a fire trap, flamethrower trap tree, which basically like this, and I had an absolutely amazing wand drop, and it's like, I don't have 220 int or whatever it is, and I'm like, uh-oh. I had to do like a whole re-gear to make it work, and that was really annoying. Whereas if you're doing a tree which kind of looks like this, then yeah, you need to get some dex on your gear, but like you're never equipping like a 200 dex item. Because even if you do like spell crit bows, you don't need to use a super high level base, you can use a low level crit multi-base. So yeah, I don't know, let me know what you think. I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Oh yeah, I got a dash enchant Star Conjurer's head, by the way. Bye-bye.